Please give everyone about another 5 minutes to enter, and then we will begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We are still waiting for more people to trickle in, so give us a few more minutes. Hello, everyone. We're still waiting for a few people to trickle in. We will start at 10 after. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. It is 10 after 10, and I do believe a majority of all attendees have entered this webinar. Again, good morning, and thank you all for joining NCDEQ for this Volkswagen Settlement Level 2 Rebate Program webinar. I am Stephen Rice, an environmental specialist for the Division of Air Quality and the Level 2 Program Manager, and I'm joined by additional DAQ staff who manage other aspects of the Volkswagen settlement. A few housekeeping rules before we get started. All attendees will be muted during the webinar. Questions can be submitted in the Q&A box and will be addressed during the question and answer time if not covered in the presentation. The raise hand feature will be disabled until the question and answer time and will only be considered for those who are calling into the webinar by phone. For those that are calling in, at that time, pressing *3 will raise your hand, and then pressing *3 again will lower your hand. All other attendees must use the Q&A box to submit questions. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available at a later date along with the slides. Finally, we have 2 hours to cover the program and application process in detail. But if we complete everything and answer all questions in less than the 2 hours, we have the option to adjourn early. If we are not able to answer all questions by the end of these 2 hours, we will let you know how to get your questions to us. When today's presentation becomes available on the DAQ Level 2 website, be aware that links found in the slides will only be active when used in presentation mode. So today is the Level 2 equivalent of the regional technical workshops that DAQ hosted in 2019 for the diesel and the DC Fast programs. But due to the circumstances of 2020, doing this presentation in person was not a viable option. Today's presentation includes an overview of the Level 2 rebate program and application process, information on when and how to submit your application, information on what happens to your application once it is submitted, information on where to find answers after this webinar, any time for questions and answers. I would like to remind attendees that this is not a public forum for comments on the implementation of the Volkswagen settlement. The RFP for the Level 2 rebate program was released on November 17, 2020. The Level 2 program overview found in the RFP states that NCDEQ is allocating the full 15% allowed in the Volkswagen State Trust Agreement for Zero Emission Vehicle, or ZEV, infrastructure projects outlined in the NC Mitigation Plan. NCDEQ will give 75% of the Phase 1 ZEV infrastructure allocation to DC fast charging infrastructure projects and 25% to Level 2 charging infrastructure projects. The primary goal is to increase use of ZEVs in place of gas-powered cars to mitigate nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, and greenhouse gas emissions in the state. To achieve that goal, the program will emphasize adding new ZEV charging infrastructure in underserved areas, existing light-duty ZEV infrastructure across the state, encourage intrastate and interstate ZEV vehicle usage at North Carolina's diverse geographic, historic, and tourist attractions, and highlight the environmental benefits of ZEVs. Applications for this program will be accepted as of 12 a.m. on January 25th, 2021. Applications will be accepted and approved on a first-come, first-served basis until funds are exhausted. So just like the diesel and DC fast programs in Phase 1, the Phase 1 Level 2 rebate program is a reimbursement program. Applicants must be able to purchase and install the equipment using their own funds. Applicants and locations are limited to $25,000 in approved rebate vouchers at any time. So applications received after an applicant or location has reached the $25,000 limit will be rejected. All rebate vouchers expire 180 days after being issued, and extensions for reimbursement will not be granted. So, who is eligible to receive a rebate voucher? In short, eligible applicants include government organizations, non-government organizations, workplaces, and multi-unit family dwellings. A more detailed breakdown of eligible applicants and descriptions is found in the RFP, along with cost share requirements, a table which reflects rebate amounts. Let's look at that table now. So this table helps visualize the maximum rebate available for a variety of eligible applicants and project types. One difference between the DC Fast program and the Level 2 program is that Level 2 does not require a project to be accessible to the general public, and we can see how that designation factors into the maximum rebate amounts. Please note that the maximum rebate amount possible for your project will either be the maximum rebate per charging port or maximum percentage of total project costs, whichever is less. Another difference between the DC Fast program and the Level 2 program is that all Level 2 applications must be submitted via the DAQ Grants Management System, also known as the GMS. For new GMS users, to gain access to the Grants Management System, you will need to complete a DAQ GMS Access Authorization Form and a State of North Carolina Substitute W-9 form. You can download these forms on DAQ's Volkswagen website, and please note that these forms should be submitted prior to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on January 20th, 2021, in order to apply as early as possible. The earlier you have access to the Grants Management System, the better. To request access to the DAQ Grants Management System, you'll need an NCID to complete the Access Request form. In this slide, we have provided links for NCID registration, as well as the How to Create an NCID guide. For our question and answer time today, we will have a demonstration on how to obtain an NCID. Some important NCID info. If you already have an individual or government NCID, there is no need to create a new NCID. or if you are a current user of the NCDOT grant system through Powell Bill, the Governor Highway Safety Program, Public Transportation Division, or other forms, put that username on the access authorization form. Also, once you have completed an NCID request, you will receive a new NCID user registration email from ncid.notifications@nc.gov. You must click the link in that email and follow the instructions to complete the registration of your NCID before submitting the GMS access authorization form. So on the DAQ access authorization form, you can see that an organization may add up to 3 authorized users to the grants management system. Please note that a separate form is required for each organizational user, and the organization address will need to match on each submitted form. Once completed, please scan and attach the form or forms in an email to svc.ncvwapplication@ncdnr.gov. So in cases where an applicant has a third party submitting applications on their behalf, the following procedures must be followed. First, the applicant must provide in writing that they are authorizing the third party to submit applications and other information on their behalf. An email is sufficient for this. The third party will need to obtain their own NCID and submit an access authorization form with the applicant's organization address information and that third party's phone number and email address. The third party's title should be listed as contractor on that form. So what would this look like? Here we can see a third-party access authorization example where an organization called Main Street Coffee is seeking the assistance of John Doe for their Level 2 project. This would be John Doe's authorization form following the acquisition of his NCID. You can see that he used his NCID and name in the form, but then used Main Street Coffee's information for organization name, address, and telephone. He then designated himself as a contractor, provided his email address, and would eventually go on to certify the form before submission. An email from Main Street Coffee authorizing John Doe could be as simple as, Main Street Coffee is applying for Level 2 rebate program funding. John Doe from Southern Energy will be the point of contact for us and will also manage this project. Here we see part of the first page of the State of North Carolina Substitute W-9 form. This form allows DAQ to set up an organization with new GMS users in the North Carolina Accounting System, or NCAS, in order to receive reimbursement payments. As stated previously, this form and the DAQ GMS Access Authorization form are available to download on DAQ's Volkswagen website. A note to new GMS users, we encourage you to submit these forms by 5 p.m. on January 20th, 2021, and please double check to make sure all required fields are filled in. And on this form, you can see that the required fields are denoted with a red asterisk. We also encourage you to fill in the documents electronically versus by hand. So some of this was stated, but it is all important information. An organization is allowed up to 3 authorized users in the GMS. If you're a current user of the NCDOT grant system, use your username on the access authorization form. Once your GMS registration is complete, you will receive a Welcome to the DAQ Enterprise Business System email from a service account-SAP account. And within the GMS, there are step-by-step tutorials that will be a very good benefit to you. So at this point, you might be feeling overwhelmed with all the forms and information needed just to apply. Believe me, you're not the only one. To make sure all application requirements are being met, we have created an application checklist which covers general requirements plus requirements specifically for the Level 2 program. The link to the checklist is found in the slide and on the DAQ Volkswagen website. All documentation must be included when submitting an application for that application to be reviewed. A complete application includes the following attachments when applicable. A charitable solicitation license, and this is only needed for nonprofits. Itemized materials, services, and labor quote, homeowners association rules, regulation, or bylaws, and this is for multifamily dwelling applications only, and a completed NCDAQ EV Level 2 rebate funding calculation form spreadsheet. Attachments must be uploaded to the DAQ grants management system along with your application. So now to the Level 2 projects. The Volkswagen State Mitigation Trust Agreement states that in Appendix D2, Paragraph 9, that trust funds may be used on costs necessary for and directly connected to the acquisition, installation, operation, and maintenance of new light-duty, zero-emission vehicle supply equipment. Just like for the DC Fast program, DAQ has compiled a list of eligible expenditures. The following items qualify for reimbursement: Level 2 charging station infrastructure, conduit, cable and wiring, electrical service box disconnect additions, concrete or asphalt replacement, paint stripping and stenciling of the station and parking spaces, the required signage for your charging station, and bollards which are put in place to protect the charging station, permit costs, labor for installation, this includes electrical and trenching, shipping of equipment, networking charges of a maximum of 5 years if paid in advance prior to voucher redemption, and EVSC maintenance contracts, again for a maximum of 5 years if paid in advance prior to the voucher redemption. This list and a list of ineligible expenditures are both found on the Level 2 RFP. So some quick tips and things to know. An awardee must not sign any agreements with vendors until a Level 2 agreement between the awardee and NCDQ is signed. Doing so would be considered a project initiation activity, and any projects initiated prior to a rebate application approval are not eligible for funding. Budget information should be as accurate as possible. This helps ensure that your reimbursement process goes smoothly. This also applies to copies of quotes. Projects may be partially funded based on available funds. This will be at the division's discretion. Keep in mind that there is a funding split of 68% for urban-suburban projects and a minimum of 30% or 32% for rural projects, which may impact full funding once availability for one or both designations is low. And all applications must be entered and submitted via the DAQ grants management system. If your project is awarded a rebate voucher, there will be in turn some reporting requirements in order to redeem the rebate. First, a quarterly reporting requirement, where quarterly reports on the status of the project are to be uploaded to the grants management system until the final project report is submitted. Annual charging station utilization reporting requirements, where annual EVSC usage data is given to NCDEQ for the previous 12 months on January 30th of each consecutive year for a 5-year period after installation of your charging station or stations. And a final project report. The final project report includes a narrative summary of the project and photographic evidence of installation. So at a minimum, there will be a site visit by DAQ as part of the final verification. DAQ staff will perform site visits at all stations to verify installation and operation of the charging station prior to approval of any voucher claim. Also, DAQ must be granted access to the charging station. So in closing, Level 2 rebate applications can be submitted via the DAQ GMS starting on January 25th, 2021 by 12 a.m. Eastern Time. GMS access authorization forms are recommended to be submitted prior to January 20th, 2021. Please email all GMS access authorization forms to svc.ncvwapplication@ncdnr.gov. And we will not accept paper, faxed, or scanned applications. All applications must be entered and submitted via the DAQ grants management system. I want to reiterate that this is a reimbursement program. All funding will be in the form of reimbursements. Applicants must be able to purchase and install the equipment using their own funds. Applicants are limited to $25,000 in approved rebate vouchers at any time, and rebate vouchers expire 180 days after issuance. No extensions will be granted. So here is the Level 2 rebate program timeline. Starting January 25th next year, applications will be evaluated on a weekly basis. A running total of remaining funds for both urban, suburban, and rural projects will be displayed on the Volkswagen website as rebate totals are subtracted from the total funding. Rebate recipients will be announced as they are awarded throughout 2021. And again, for good measure, new GMS users, please remember that we recommend that all required forms be submitted by 5 p.m. on January 20th, 2021, in order to allow for processing time and for you to get access to the GMS as early as possible. If you have any questions following today's webinar, you can visit the frequently asked questions section of the Volkswagen website at deq.nc.gov/VW settlement. If you don't find answers there, the answers that you're looking for, you can email your questions directly to deq.nc_VW-grants@ncdner.gov. There are also several local, public, and private resources you can utilize during this process, such as Centralina Clean Cities Coalition, Forsyth County Office of Environmental Assistance and Protection, Land of Sky Regional Council, the Mecklenburg County Air Quality Agency, the North Carolina State University Clean Energy Technology Center, Piedmont Triad Regional Council, Plug-in NC, Sustainable Sandhills, Triangle J Council of Governments, and the Western NC Regional Air Quality Agency. Their contact information is available on the DAQ Volkswagen website. So here are your DEQ technical contacts for the Level 2 program. Again, I am Stephen Rice, and I am managing the Level 2 infrastructure program. There's Dave Willis, who manages the DC Fast infrastructure program. Brian Phillips, who manages all aspects of the VW mitigation plan. And also Robin Barrows, who manages the Volkswagen outreach. So we wanted everyone to know that this is looking like a very popular Phase 1 program. If your Level 2 project is not awarded a rebate voucher in Phase 1, you will still have the opportunity to reapply in Phase 2. And some information on Phase 2, the Phase 2 planning and stakeholder process will begin once Phase 1 contracts for the diesel bus and vehicle and DC Fast programs are in place. When the Phase 2 stakeholder process starts, notifications will be posted to our website and sent to subscribers of the NCVW email distribution list. To sign up for the NCVW email distribution list, send an email to daq.nc_VWgrants@ncdner.gov with subscribe in the subject line. So that concludes the informational part of our webinar, and now we will transition to demonstrations on how to create an NCID and how to submit a Level 2 application in the grants management system. Dave Willis will be guiding you through the NCID registration process, and if he can be unmuted at this time, that would be great. When you're ready, Dave, take it away.
Dave, you seem to be muted or having trouble with your audio.
Is that better?
Yes, now we hear you, Dave.
Okay, that's actually kind of strange. Not that I haven't had any sound trouble before. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you, Stephen, for all that great information. With the NCIDs, we have created an instructional PDF, a how to create your NCID. It will be linked in the slides. So obviously the first place you're going to need to go to is ncid.nc.gov. And I'll just go ahead and warn you, you'll need to either be using Firefox or Internet Explorer. A lot of times in Google Chrome, it doesn't work as straightforward as it should. So I would suggest Firefox or Internet Explorer. Second, what you're going to do, down on the bottom right, you see the highlighted register. You're going to click on that. Then that's going to take you to the next page. And you're always going to register as an individual user. Rarely in any other circumstance are you going to register as a business employee. State employees actually don't do this process anymore. They have a single point for their agencies. And even local government employees, you'll always just register as an individual. Once you click that, it's going to go to a bunch of questions that it's going to ask you. So you're going to fill out your desired username. It's going to tell you whether that's going to work or not. You fill out all your personal information. You give them your email address, your mobile phone number, and then you have to follow these password requirements. I mean, everybody's gotten used to this kind of stuff, and then they have to match. When you do this, you click continue at this point. It's going to tell you whether everything worked or not, or you still have errors. At this point, it's asking you to check your email to see if you've gotten the message from, it doesn't actually say this, but they did message you, a message was sent to you. Well, that message was sent to you by email. And if you go to your email, it'll look like this. It'll give you the code, or you can click here. If you click there, it's going to pull up your browser, and it's going to tell you your NCID is complete, but it's not quite complete. You still have to go in and answer your personal questions. Exactly. So it's going to say, do not close your browser, complete the remaining steps. You click continue, and you have to fill in these five questions. There's a drop-down list, kind of the random, what was your first pet, what was your first car, that kind of stuff. Where did your mother go to high school? So once you save those answers, you're finally complete at that point. That is, and then it'll pop up success. At that point, you're completely done with creating your NCID. Going all the way through that sometimes is what catches people. A lot of times the email coming back from the NCID system is going to go to your spam or your junk mail. It just depends on how, the state has been flagged in the past as sending out junk mail, but that's usually corrected within a couple days. So we've had a lot of people that have already registered for their NCIDs through the DC Fast program and the other Volkswagen stuff. They already have access to the GMS. As a lot of you come into the system, we will need to have a little bit of time to process your NCIDs. So you'll need to send us our forms, and then we'll get you in, and you'll get an email from the system saying, welcome to the GMS system.
All right, thank you, Dave. One question that came to mind is, I know we need to update the password every 90 days for our NCID. Will that be a requirement for applicants as well?
Yes. The requirement is a system-wide requirement. So every 90 days, you'll get an email from the NCID system saying your password is expiring in 5 days, or it's either 5 or 10 days. I can't remember. I usually ignore that first email and then my password stops working. It's probably not the best way to handle that, but then you have to update your NCID. And I am seeing a question about NCID, several in there, and I guess we're going to get to those at the end. So I guess I'm handing it back to you, Stephen.
Sure. To continue on with just one of your last points, Dave, if there are any issues with passwords to your NCID, that's something that DIT will need to help resolve. There is contact information and a process to reset passwords if they happen to expire. We can assist, but ultimately that is a IT issue. And thank you, Dave, for your information on the NCID. Now I'm going to demonstrate the application process within the grants management system. I do want to mention that the system will not permit you to access the application until January 25th, but this demo will give you an idea of what the system looks like. If you want to see the information I'm about to enter at any time after the webinar, it is found in a sample application on the DAQ Level 2 webpage. Okay, so here is the home screen for the grants management system. The system was designed to operate best when using Internet Explorer, but work has been done to improve the experience with other browsers. To log into the system, you're going to use your NCID and password. Once you're in the system, you will see a variety of panels on the home page, including portals for frequently asked questions and tutorials. To get to the application, you're going to want to click the Division of Air Quality Grants panel right here up at the top. A new browser window will open to show you your account home page. The layout can be configured to some extent, and you can see on my home page things like recent items, web links, and a number of search options where the ability to create a new application is found. Let's go through the process of applying for a Level 2 rebate. First, let's make this full screen. There we go. So by clicking search right here, you can see that this account is set to reference the NCDEQ DAQ grants, and under the available options, we've already pre-selected the DAQ grant application for Level 2 charge. I'm going to click this link for the application form. A quick note, since I'm using a test account, the organization is being pre-selected, but right before this point, you will see an option to search and select your organization. You can see that I'm starting on the first of 6 tabs, all of which are for different parts of the application. In this project tab, I'm going to enter my project's basic information, starting with the project's title according to the sample application we created before the webinar. And I think I can pull up the sample application right here. I'm just going to put this off to the side, make life easy. Copy and paste that information. Then right below you can see there are drop-down fields for specifying some project details. I'm going to select the appropriate details and then move on to entering the project location information. So under program type, we are limited to the ZEV infrastructure option. In this example, I would be considered a government application type. The equipment type would be just level 2 charging. This will not be for workplace or multi-unit dwellings. And again, my project type will be publicly accessible. And then under project location, you're going to type in your street address and all the following information, which I will do right here. Our city is just nondescript ABC. We're going to enter our latitude and longitude. And then in this example, we will have more than 12 hours available to the public. So at this point, I'm going to want to check to make sure all my information is entered correctly. And you can see that the system recognized that I did not enter everything appropriately. I need to enter my zip code, and it looks like I need to address the latitude for this project. Brian, it looks like our latitude needs to be adjusted.
Steve, we can't see your screen anymore.
Yes, I'm trying to get an appropriate latitude. There we go. Okay, we were off by just a little bit in the example. We can adjust that later. But at this point, now that we see there are no errors found, we have the options to save and close our progress or continue on to the next. Just a heads up that the GMS will log you out after a period of inactivity. So if you're stepping away from your application for a while, it may be a good idea to save and close so you don't need to start from scratch. For right now, I'm going to click the next button to continue the application. So this next tab is where I'm going to enter the contact information for the project's authorized representative, project manager, and financial contact. While it's possible that one person can fill these 3 roles, in this sample project, we have 3 different individuals to enter. I will need to fill in all of these fields or else I will get the errors when clicking check, just like before. And then finally, financial contact. I can check and see that no errors were found. So I will continue on to the next tab. In the Charger Details tab, I'm going to enter the requested information for any chargers being installed at the project location. The full list of requirements for a qualifying Level 2 project are found in the RFP, but for this tab, please remember that a project in total requires a minimum of 2 ports and at least 1 designated and clearly marked EV parking space per port. Also, each charger must provide at least 6.6 kilowatts of charging power and have a minimum 5-year warranty for equipment and service. Now that I'm ready to enter my chargers, I'm going to click Add Charger and begin filling in the fields. For multiple chargers, click Add Chargers as many times as necessary. Again, remember the 5-year minimum warranty period. Okay, with all of my chargers being entered, I will continue on to the next tab. So here we can see that my project type and its corresponding information has been highlighted based on what I entered in the project tab. In this funding tab, I'm going to need to complete the rebate calculation worksheet and then enter the total from that worksheet into the total here. The SAP team is updating the link to vehicle spreadsheet to say link to rebate calculation worksheet, but the link does still direct me to the correct file. So we're going to click that and fill it in. We'll open a new browser window, and then you're encouraged to open the file. Okay, I think it's just opening in a different location, but I do have a copy of a completed NC Level 2 charging station rebate calculation worksheet. You can see up at the top there are worksheet instructions. First, fill in the blue spaces with your project information. Check the box that corresponds to your project category. The potential rebate amounts will automatically be calculated. And upon completion of this worksheet, save it, then upload it as an attachment with your application in the DAQ Grants Management System. So again, we're going to focus on these blue fields. First, the organization name. So again, we have City of ABC. Project title was our Historic District Charging Stations. Under the Chargers tab, I entered a total of 5 stations to be installed. And here you're going to enter your total project cost. And so based on fictitious quotes for the sample application, we've entered $30,000 for the total cost. In this sample application, I do not have rebates, incentives, or subsidies that would supplement any project cost, so I'm going to leave the field beneath as is. If you have any of those in your application, you will see that dollar amount entered be subtracted from the total project cost. And now I need to select my project category, which will correspond with the highlighted option in the funding tab back in the application. If we look to the right, and we can see that this was already selected appropriately. If we look to the right, we can see that there is no difference between the maximum rebate per charging port and the maximum percentage of total project costs. But if there were, the calculated rebate total would be the lesser of the two. And the calculated rebate total amount is found down here. Now I'm going to enter this value as the calculated rebate amount total in the space provided in the application funding tab. So since we would be allotted $25,000, I'm going to enter the total as $25,000. I am also going to need to save the completed rebate calculation worksheet to include it as an attachment later in the application process. So now that I'm in the project details tab, I'm instructed to describe project procurement, installation, activation, and commissioning, testing, and signage. This is where I should note collaborations with interested utilities, local businesses, cities, counties, or other entities, and describe the sustainable business model for the project. I should also describe the customer support service accessibility and the networking and networking security for both payment and data capture. Please note that there is a maximum of 3,000 characters for this text box. And if you want to see an example of this completed field, please feel free to check the sample application. Just for right now, I'll be incorporating the first part of that sample application's project details. So now I've made it to the final tab of the application. Here's where the authorized representative will certify that all proposed activities will be carried out, that all money received will be solely for the purposes for which it is intended, that records documenting the planning process and implementation will be maintained and submitted when requested, and that DEQ is hereby granted access to inspect the project sites and/or records. That last sentence states that if the application is selected, a contract with DEQ will be executed. Again, the SAP team is working on updating this terminology since in actuality, an agreement, not a contract, is part of the Level 2 program. To show you the two main options at this point in the application, I'm going to click Save and Close before clicking Submit. But I will enter this information right now. You can see that the date field is grayed out. That will automatically input the date on the day that you click Submit. But again, for now, I will hit Save and Close. Now I see the confirmation that my application has been saved and the application ID it was assigned in the GMS, being this number right here. I also see a reminder that my application is not complete until all required documents have been submitted, and that there is a link to the required attachments checklist for me to reference if need be as well. That is here just down below. This is one location where I can upload required documents to the GMS. I'm going to select my rebate calculation worksheet and attach it to my applications now. But first, I'm going to copy and paste my application ID for later reference. Down here, you can see click Browse to select the file. And even though we did not save a new example of that calculation worksheet, I will go ahead and take the one that I had been provided before, population or copy sample of the level 2 rebate calculator worksheet. I'll hit open. You'll see that it's been entered here in the field, and I will click attach. So I'll be able to confirm that the upload was successful by viewing my application in the grants homepage. I'm going to, again, if I had not already, copy this application ID number. And so finding my saved application will be easier. So now back under Grants Home, I can select View Applications to search for my saved application. I'm going to enter my application ID and hit search. And now I can see my application and some application metadata. If I click on the highlighted ID number, I'll be able to view my application. So now I can go through and view all the information I just entered into the application, including the rebate calculation worksheet I attached right before saving, or right after saving, I should say. And here is that attachment, and here is the calculation worksheet. So I'm not going to spend much time in the view application field because if I want to submit my application for real, I need to go to the edit application form back in the grants home. A quick tip, if you no longer have your application ID copied and ready to paste, it is found here towards the top of the page. So for some reason, if you copied something else, but you want to retain that number, it is right here along with your project title. So just like before in Grants Home, I can look down to search and select Edit Application Form. I will use my application ID to find my application in the system. And again, I can click on the highlighted number right there. So in the Edit Application, I can make changes to my application information before it's submitted. I left off at the Certification tab before, so I will go there now to finish my application. Everything entered should remain the same. Seeing that my application is complete, I'm going to click Submit. You see a message saying that changes cannot be made after clicking the Submit button. Press OK to submit or cancel. I'm going to press OK. So if this were a real application, I would receive an email confirming my submitted application shortly. Again, from this page, I can upload attachments, or I can upload attachments later from View Applications. So again, the application information entered can no longer be changed, but you can retroactively continue to add attachments to your application. So the last thing I want to cover in the GMS is the DAQ training library. Here you can look through modules which help guide you through the GMS. I won't go through any just right now, but when you gain access to the system, they will be a great resource. So that concludes our demonstration of the grants management system. end the demonstrational part of the Volkswagen Settlement Level 2 Rebate Program webinar. We will now address questions collected in the Q&A box. A big thank you to Robin, Melanie, and Sheila for going through all of these questions. Our host will now attempt to enable the raise hand feature for those who called in to the webinar by phone. Again, pressing *3 will raise your hand, and pressing *3 again will lower your hand. All other attendees must use the Q&A box to submit questions. Robin, whenever you're ready, I think we are ready.
Hello, everybody. We have a lot of questions today. We're going to try and get through them, but we're going to start with an easy one from Harriet Altman, who asks, when will the slides and the recording be posted?
Well, the final versions of the presentation and then later the recording shouldn't be available, or shouldn't take too long to be available. Brian, are we planning to upload these slides from the presentation later today?
I'm not sure if it'll be today, but if not today, it'll be probably next week.
Okay, so definitely within a week's time. And again, we're going to take the recording from today's webinar, get that processed and also made available on our DAQ Volkswagen webpage.
Okay, Stephen, Bob Spatz did not see the hardware that's being covered. So what hardware is covered?
Hardware pertaining to the level 2 chargers specifically is found in the RFP. I know we didn't go over specifics today, but there is a section that in the RFP that gives the requirements for these chargers. And again, now going through the RFP that can be found on our website. There is a section that talks about the chargers specifically. So again, we have eligible ZEV project types, followed by equipment requirements. So the requirements for all equipment included in this project is found in this section of the RFP.
Okay, we have a question from Kevin Witchker about design costs as an eligible expense. So are design costs an eligible expense under this program?
Let me ask Dave. Dave, for the DC fast charging, were those included as eligible costs?
When you start talking about design costs, there's a couple of different things that you really come across. And in a general answer, yes, they're going to be included. But when you're talking about, are you designing just the EV area that these are going in, or you're designing the larger parking lot or whatever else that's going there? So you have to be really careful that you stick to the specifics for the EV spaces themselves. So, I mean, the easiest way to handle it is we would look at your costs and see what you're actually doing at the time.
Yes, and a reminder that every cost that would qualify as part of the rebate reimbursement would need to pertain to the project itself.
Next question from Colin Walker. Since they need to be a networked EVSE, is the cellular Wi-Fi signal boosting hardware an eligible expenditure?
If that is a requirement based on your situation, if there's low Wi-Fi and signal is not sustainable, cuts out intermittently, then I believe that would qualify as something that would meet the requirement of constant networking. to my knowledge, yes, any kind of booster would be considered an eligible cost. Brian, would you agree with that for the purposes of maintaining the network connectivity?
Yes, but be aware that you're limited to the rebate amount per port. So that's the maximum is $5,000 per port for a government operated facility, and goes down from there based on the type of project. And that information is found in the RFP.
Yeah, so accessories added on to the charging station could eventually get to the point where those costs are not going to be factored into the rebate. They essentially become out-of-pocket costs.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Okay, we have a question from David Ingram. If we already have access to the grant management system as part of Phase 1 DC fast charging grants, do we need to resubmit anything? I assume to get access to the grant management system.
No, the two forms, that the access authorization form and the tax-related form, those are only for new GMS users. If you already have access to the grants management system, you should be able to use your current NCID and password and gain access to the level 2 parts of the grants management system once those parts have been made available. Again, on January 25th, 2021.
Thank you, Stephen. Chad Corwin asks, so do they need to buy or install devices prior to applying for rebates? The RFP talks about showing proof of payments, photos of EV units installed, etc.
So any payment for the project needs to be made after an agreement between the awardee and NCDAQ has been signed and officialized. Any purchases prior to that happening would not be considered eligible. In fact, it might cause the project to be considered ineligible. So you are allowed to get quotes because we need an understanding of how much your project will cost, but you are not to get into any agreements with vendors or make purchases for any of this equipment before receiving the rebate.
Thank you, Stephen. And I think that answers your question, Dominic Miner, as well, about installation time and the time of application. This question comes from Kimberly Conley. From the time of winning an award, what would be the estimated timing of funding?
I think I have that here specifically. I do have some key question and answers, and that's certainly one of them. First, do note that there is a difference, or it will make a difference based on when you receive your rebate and then how long it takes for your project to be finalized. Payment for the rebate will only occur after that final verification is completed. And I do have a note here about budget because the reimbursement process is handled by a separate aspect of DAQ. It says typically 2 weeks would be the turnaround time for the reimbursement, but it could take longer depending on the volume of reimbursement requests received at the same time and staffing resources available to process the reimbursement requests.
Thank you. Mike Kozer asks, must the annual usage be separated for each charging station, even if they have a single metering service?
Yes, we want. Oh, go ahead.
Hey,
Dave.
Stephen, I can answer that one.
Be my guest. Thank you.
Okay, so the reporting is not really for, it sounds like you're asking for the electrical usage. This is actually, which that's part of it, but this is, you'll have to have these networked through a service provider. I'd rather not name them, but hopefully you know who they are. Those services would be able to tell you how many instances each station and each port were used. So we would need that on a very granular level. We would need an overall, it's 2 reports that we'd actually get on an annual basis. The total usage at each station, and then we'd actually get the individual charging instances in an aggregated list. So yes, it must be broken down per port.
Okay, thank you, Dave. I hope that answers your question. We're going to Lance Artis, who asks, and this is for clarification, and I think this is worth clarifying again. Charging units can be purchased but not installed before approval of the grant to qualify for the rebate.
Again, I want to clarify that all purchases before an agreement between an awardee and NCDAQ are not eligible for rebate funding. Any cost that is eligible has to be made after that agreement between the awardee and NCDAQ.
Thank you, Stephen. Next question, are retractable cables required?
Well, while I don't know anything about a requirement, to my knowledge, most of these cables do have a retractable ability. Again, if it's just the standard cable available on a qualifying level 2 charger, that if the charger itself meets the requirements, then that cable would meet the requirements.
I'll step in here, Stephen. The RFP states that the charging system must incorporate a cord management system. So if that's retractable, that includes, that's what is considered. And that is on page 8 of the RFP.
Okay, I'm just trying to slide down to the next question. I'm not sure where it is. Okay, we're going to go to Greg Sponsoler's question. Would replacements of existing charging stations be eligible? And there are a few questions here. So maybe we can answer that one and we'll try for the next one. Would replacements be eligible if charging stations are non-networked and if they are older hardware systems that no longer have parts and components available for repairs?
So I'm trying to think of the differences off the top of my head. Again, I'm thinking of the DC fast, where replacements were not eligible. Dave, is that correct?
For the DC fast.
So level 2 replacements will be eligible. The replacement charging site must be networked. So anything refund has to be networked.
Yeah, correct. Like Brian said, any new charger that is the one replacing the old charger must meet those requirements, one of the requirements being the network ability.
So Melissa Weber wants a refresher on at what time of day does the application open on January 25th? Is that at 12:01 a.m.?
As of right now, it is exactly midnight, so 12:00 a.m. Eastern Time on January 25th, 2021.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, from Paul Harvin, can a single corporate entity submit a single application for multiple locations, or must separate applications be submitted for each location?
Thank you for that question. Separate applications must be submitted for separate locations. So one application pertains to one location specifically. And again, it was mentioned a few times in the presentation, but each organization and location are both not allowed to receive more than $25,000 in rebate vouchers total. So as you pick multiple locations, the locations might not reach that $25,000 mark, but the organization itself might, depending on how many projects it wants to do. So keep in mind the organization and the location limitations for that $25,000 maximum rebate.
Thank you, Stephen. Michael Kaufman wants to know if there is a list of recommended vendors.
The short...
No.
Well, yes, the short answer is no. I believe there is some information regarding that topic in our preloaded Q&A that you can find on the North Carolina DAQ Volkswagen Level 2 page.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from John Mazunik. Does each charger equal 2 ports, or does each port get entered individually?
So the RFP has a definition for port. And
Stephen, I'm going to interject here. I believe that question was asked during the grant management system demonstration.
Okay.
So I believe it's related to, would it be entered in GMS separately?
Well, you would. So again, I just want to show that we do have a definition of port in the RFP, but when you're entering it for that charger, if a charger has 1 port, you're just going to enter 1 port for that particular row. If a charger has 2 ports, then you would enter 2 ports in that particular row. And again, to meet the minimum requirement of the application, the project itself, the project in that application has to have at least 2 ports. So that could be 1 charger that has 2 ports on it, or that could be 2 charging stations, each with 1 port. The important thing is that it meets that minimum of 2 ports per project. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Stephen. Daniel Shanahan wants to ask, to confirm, if the applicant has other funding sources, that amount would be deducted from the allowable funding from the Volkswagen funds, correct?
Correct. Going back to the worksheet, if I knew that my total project cost without any outside monies being involved was $30,000, then my net cost would be the $30,000. Again, based on the funding requirements, we wouldn't be able to cover all $30,000 in that example. But if we went ahead, let me enable editing here just to show. So again, if we start with 30,000, oh, those are ports. We do not have 30,000 ports. So $30,000, and then I knew I had a certain amount of money, again, in the other rebates, incentives, and subsidies that would be applied to this project. And let's say that would come out to be some figure, we'll say $1,200. You can see that the $1,200 is deducted from my net project cost. And in this case, it wouldn't change the calculated rebate amount, but for smaller projects where that difference would be a greater percentage, you could see that the funding potential maximum funding would change. And again, in the worksheet, this is where you would enter the rebates, incentives, and subsidies.
Okay, I hope that answers your question. We've got a question from Tiffany Faro. What is the average total initial cost, charger, and installation per port? And is there an amount that should be budgeted annually for ongoing maintenance?
Well, the costs of charging stations, considering per port, off the top of my head, I do not have a reference. Again, we're encouraging, again, to people to go out and, again, you can get quotes and ideas of how much these would cost from the different hardware and charging station providers. In terms of budgeting, again, the 5-year warranty for the service and the maintenance is considered an eligible cost. So if that's something that can be, if that estimate is something provided to you by the company or the manufacturer of the charging station, or again, whoever's managing the networking, those could be entered into the application and would be, again, covered in the rebate. In terms of like what these costs in real life are, I know we don't provide a reference to that. Brian or Dave, is this something through the DC Fast? I know they're 2 separate chargers, but is there like a ballpark of what these projects would cost? In our example, there were 5 chargers and $30,000.
I don't have a number that I could give you, Stephen.
Yeah,
there's no real way to tell. It varies by manufacturer and like the charger.
Yeah, I mean, just like other products on the market, the time of year could potentially change the cost. There are a number of factors that will influence how much these projects end up costing. But definitely recommend going out and getting that information firsthand.
Thank you, Stephen. Lisa Baker would like to know if we've already been granted access to the DAQ grant management system through a phase 1 diesel vehicle award. Do we need to request a second separate access in order to start a level 2 application? Or will we be able to find the application for level 2 on the January 25th by searching?
Yes, thank you for that question. You do not need to submit any new forms to gain access to the GMS. With the NCID and password and the access that you already have, you will currently you will not see the level 2 project application available in the GMS, but as of January 25th, 2021, naturally you would be able to see that and begin the application process.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Gregory Michaud asks, does a detailed quotation have to be submitted with the application, or can an applicant-produced estimate be provided instead?
Well, seeing that to enter that information into the calculation spreadsheet and the funding amount is based on what's in that spreadsheet, those numbers should be based off a quote. The quote itself does not need to be, well, I mean, the quote is a required document. It just, I'm trying to think, especially if people.
A quote is a required document for your application.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of if it's something that really could even be ballparked. It's something.
No, it needs to be accurate data. So they need to provide a quote with their application as an attachment.
Yeah, we will be referencing the quotes provided versus the funding amounts requested in the application. So like Brian said, if you use that actual number, we can see that everything matches, and we know that everything will calculate properly, and the rebate will reflect the accurate amount of the project.
Our next question comes from Ajay Sadiq. Can the site visits be accomplished remotely?
That is a good question. It's been a very strange year. We've had times of lockdown and times of not lockdown, and different outcomes based on those two things. The photographic evidence is something that could be taken and sent to us. The spirit of this is that someone from DAQ comes out and essentially confirms not only that the work was done, but that the charger itself is functional before that payment is made. Brian, is that something?
Our intentions are to do on-site visits. We will revisit that depending on what the situation is with COVID in the future. But right now, our intention is to be on-site to visibly see those sites.
Okay, thank you. This is a question about eligible locations, and Philip Samanchik wants to know who they can contact just to make sure that their location is eligible for one of these grants.
Well, included in the presentation, the generic email address for all kinds of questions, including this one. If an email is the best way to send us that question, it's daq.nc_VWgrants@ncdnr.gov. And Sheila, can you repeat the concern in this question? Was it location eligibility?
Yes, it was about location eligibility and clarifying before, I assume before putting the work into doing a rebate application to make sure that their location is eligible.
Yeah, if down the road, if you want to send specifics to your location or multiple locations that you're considering for this project, as much information as possible would be appreciated, and we can help determine if that location would qualify.
Stephen, Greg Cohn would like to know, if you have more than one location, which latitude and longitude do you put in the application?
Okay, again, thanks for that question. Seeing that each application entered into the GMS is pertaining to one single location, what you'll have to do is just figure out the order by which you want to apply for these projects, and the top priority project and its location will be entered first into the GMS, and then after that is complete, and you can begin on the second priority project, that's where you'll enter the second address. So multiple applications submitted into the GMS will reflect the different project locations.
Okay, we have a question from Colin Walker. What happens if the final project cost changes higher or lower than the initial estimates submitted in the application?
So if this is following an issuance of the rebate, we are not adjusting the rebate funding amount. If your project becomes more expensive, the maximum that we are able to reimburse is what is specified in the agreement and in the rebate itself. If the project, well, yeah, seeing that the question was specifically mentioning if it becomes more expensive, that's how we would handle price increase after a rebate has been issued.
And if the project is less, we will only pay up to the invoiced amount.
Robert Davey would like to know, is there a deadline to complete construction of the EV stations?
So since construction can only begin after an agreement between the awardee and DEQ is made, the construction would need to be completed within that 180 days. And please keep in mind that after that 180 days passes, the rebate no longer has value. There will no longer, or there will be no extensions. We would definitely recommend, if you're granted that rebate, you start on that work as soon as possible, especially considering that one of the final steps to be reimbursed is that final verification meeting. And if Plan A is still going out and doing it in person, we are prepared to do that in a timely manner. That's something that would have to be orchestrated between the authorized rep or project manager and the NCDAQ. But if construction takes too long and the project goes past 180 days, there will be no extension of that time period.
Okay, I have a question from Michael Zenner. Any list of vendors that we can refer to for costs? Can we or are we encouraged to use the statewide contract for EV charging equipment?
I think we had answered before. We don't have a list of costs or companies, contractors on hand. That's not something that we provide. I know in the Q&A that's already prepped on the website, it does mention I'm seeing if that's one of the questions I have now. Brian, there is some resource at least to starting on where to find that charger. I don't believe that resource gives costs though.
No, I mean, we recommend you contact one of our additional resources on our website. If you're required to use state contracts, then you will have to use a state contract. But if you're not required, you don't have to use a vendor on state contract. If you look at NC and the NC Clean Technology Center are really good references for EV charging infrastructure, as well as the other entities on that list. It's on our website.
Stephen, John Mazurnik would like to know, if there are more applications than funds available, will funding awards per port be reduced to each recipient?
Right now, the plan is to issue these rebates until there are no funds left in the urban, suburban, and rural pots. As we get closer to depleting those funds, granted at any time we can elect to not fully fund a project, but especially as the money starts getting tight, that's when we might start seeing partial funding on ports. I don't believe at this time we don't have any process in place for like a calculated way of doing it consistently across the board. It's really just we encourage people to apply as early as possible so that the more than enough funds are available for your projects, and that way we can fully fund every the chargers and the ports and give you the best chance of being fully funded.
We have quite a few questions about ports coming in. This one is from Gil Johnson. Rebate amount is $5,000 per port. We're looking at chargers with 2 ports each. In this case, is each charger eligible for $10K?
No, it's $5,000 per port. So I mean, if you're doing it's per port, so each port is $5,000 per port at the maximum for government. That's publicly accessible. But you're still limited to $25,000 cap per applicant per and location.
Jonathan Meisenheimer wants to know, does one station with 2 ports meet eligibility?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, as long as there are that minimum of 2 ports, a single station with 2 ports would meet the minimum requirements for a rebate on that project.
Thanks, Stephen. Daniel Shanahan asks, are 5 years of networking costs upfront required and 5 years of maintenance paid upfront?
Those costs must be included in the rebate calculator. Any cost previous or after the rebate amount has been factored will not be covered by the rebate. But those costs can be calculated and included in the application process.
Lance Artis wants to know, are the internal reports generated from the chargers acceptable?
We do have some templates on the data requirements. I guess we'd have to start with seeing how much of that data is included on the charger's report itself. To my knowledge, requesting data from the networking provider is not problematic, not difficult, and they certainly would include all the data and more that we're looking for. But again, if you can show that the internal report from your charging station meets our data requirements, then that would be acceptable.
Okay, we're going to move on past some questions that I think have been asked previously. Lauren Anderson asks, would ports on opposite ends of the same parking lot be considered 2 locations?
No.
Sorry, I was taking a drink there. The parking area.
No.
It's
No, put that on the same application. It's the same address.
You just also need to put in the description that a site map or something, so when we get out there to the site, we'd know where to go.
Colin Walker just wants to reconfirm about the non-networked replacement answer. The rebate can be used for replacing older non-networked EVSE.
yes.
As long as the new charger is networked.
And meets all of the requirements listed in the RFP, additional to the networking requirements.
Okay, Luke Fishbeck asks, can you clarify multi-unit dwelling qualifications? Specifically, can a complex of individually owned single-family homes with a central parking area qualify?
The definition of multi-unit dwelling, you should be able to see here on my screen, or the presentation screen. It is found in the RFP. I'll go ahead and read it now. A multi-unit dwelling, also known as a MUD, is a classification of housing where multiple separate housing units for residential inhabitants are contained within one building or several buildings within one complex. This includes, but is not limited to, apartment buildings, condominiums, and excludes individually owned townhouses, row houses, and mobile homes.
Corey Gordon would like to know, is the minimum 6.6 kilowatts dispense power requirement a per port requirement? Also, is that a static minimum or peak capacity spec?
Well, it would be per port, seeing that some charging stations only have one port to offer. In terms of the differentiate,
if it's a smart charger, it can step down to trickle into the vehicle, but it has to be 6.6 minimum per port. So if you do demand share or something like that, it can't lower it for the ports across the board. So if you have 2 ports and then you have a demand share, and if you have both plugged in and it drops below 6.6, we wouldn't allow that. So it would have to have a minimum of 6.6 available, and then at some point when the vehicle is fully charged, it could tone that down or drop that down some based on what the car wants, because the car is actually what decides how much charge it can take at any given time.
Okay. We have Whitney Schmidt here. Thankfully, she has answered one of the questions. She says less than, as far as an estimate for an EV project, less than 20,000 per project. We always estimate 20,000 for an EV project from end to end, but often it is much less. So I hope that answers some of your estimate questions. We have a question from Daniel Shanahan. On the 5-year prepayment of networking, is it permissible for applicants to pay 1 year at a time?
No, it must be all paid up front.
Bob Langston with the North Carolina Zoo asked, would we have one contact in GMS per department or one contact per agency, the zoo?
In the GMS, it's per
organization.
It's actually per project, I think, is the way it's actually going to come down to in the GMS, because you're going to have a project manager, responsible official, and a financial contact that you can have for each project.
Thank you, Dave. We have a question from Dan Gerlach. Does the work and verification have to be done in 180 days, or do those steps plus, Do those steps plus submission for reimbursement have to be done in 180 days? I'm sorry, I can repeat that if you didn't catch it.
Well, I think I get the gist of the question, and something that was covered in the presentation, that 180 day, like everything must be complete in that 180 day time frame. The rebate is set to expire after 180 days, and if we haven't come to do that final verification, there's no way to get paid prior to that. So if it goes past the point where our final verification hasn't occurred and it's 180 days, that's the extent of the rebate.
And sort of related to that question that Sheila just read, Phil Johnson wants to know, if the overall project is longer than 180 days, can the project be phased to install the chargers within the 180-day period?
Again, I'll reiterate that any work for this project needs to be done within that 180 days, and the final verification to essentially confirm that the project is done and meets the requirements based on the application on behalf of DAQ needs to happen within those 180 days as well.
Oh, okay. I have a question from Dan Laurent. Is a maintenance plan required if the charging station is covered by a 5-year warranty?
Well, I believe the warranty and the maintenance program, it needs to cover both aspects. We're requiring 5 years on the maintenance of the charger itself, but then also 5 years on the ability to acquire data from that charger. So if there's any deficiency with that within the standard warranty, that will need to be factored into the application.
And Stephen, similarly, Lance Artis asked if the network fee and maintenance is covered in the cost of the charger, is that acceptable to meet the requirements?
Sorry, Melanie, can you repeat that, please?
Yes.
The beginning of that.
If the network fee and maintenance is covered under the cost of the charger, is that acceptable to meet the requirements?
Yeah, it just needs to be reflected, like when you provide the documentation behind your project, what your project entails and all aspects of the project, that proof that the two aspects to be covered under warranty are included at the time of your application.
Thank you, Stephen. As of now, that is the last of our questions that we have currently received.
Okay. I think just in the spirit of questions, it has been just short of an hour of questions, and I do have a couple more. Again, some questions that I went through and I thought would be kind of applicable to everyone. We did cover a few of them.
Stephen,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. We did have another question just come in.
Okay.
Greg Cohn, if the existing parking lot is ADA compliant, is that okay?
Yes. We are encouraging, or that's part in the RFP, will the ADA compliance mentioned. And I do believe that's part of the questions I had set aside. It says you should check your local zoning office for ADA information. There's no statewide ADA regulations for the EV charging sites, but if you can document the aspects of your location that are ADA compliant, that would be information that we would need. Well, I will, unless there are more questions in the chat box, and Melanie and Sheila, you can stop me at any point if we get new questions from our attendees. I'll just run through, like I said, my kind of cherry pick list of questions and answers, and these are what's available on the website. First, a standard question might be, is this program for light duty infrastructure only? And the answer is yes, this program is for zero emission light duty vehicle charging infrastructure projects only.
Stephen, we've got.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt?
No, you did not. You please go ahead.
Okay, this one might be an easy one from Bob Spatz, and he's asked it a few times. So, will a list of the participants, I assume, of this webinar be published?
We do have the total registration list. I'd have to reference the attendees that I'm assuming WebEx is storing on hand. We can cross-reference that with everyone that has registered. Is Bob, I'm assuming he's asking and able to kind of contact and network other people that were involved. If I can collect everyone that attended, Brian, is that something that we would publish on the website? Or how would we handle that information?
If someone wants to list, it's an email request for now until we figure it out with our PIO.
Okay, and that's a good call. We want to make sure that we're not breaching any kind of information releases with the attendees list, but after we reference that information, we'll make it available in any way that we can. Okay, again, as maybe some other questions will trickle in. Again, something that was mentioned before, and I'll restate it. There was a question: how do we get accurate cost estimates for the total project? And the answer to that is you will need to contact a level 2 charging equipment vendor for these cost estimates. Again, cost estimates are encouraged to get a reference on how much your project would cost, but agreements with that vendor are not allowed prior to an agreement between NCDEQ and an awardee. Also a question: if you received an award for DC fast charging for a DC fast charging station, are you eligible for the level 2 program? And the answer to that is yes. As long as you are in good standing within the DC fast program, you are eligible to apply for level 2 rebates. Something I don't think we mentioned much, but is found in the RFP, a question for if the awardee is the owner of the property or the location that the project is to be done on, what type of site host agreement is required? Is there a preferred template? So a simple statement that the applicant is the owner of that property is sufficient. If he's the owner, he's therefore the site host, and there is not a preferred template on which an applicant must make this statement. Another question: if a charger is located in a public pay-to-park garage, is that considered publicly accessible? The answer to that is yes. It would be the same as paying for street parking, and the lot is open at least 12 hours a day. So public pay-to-park garages are considered publicly accessible.
All right, Stephen, we have another question that came in from Lauren Anderson. Do multi-unit dwellings need to have EV charging rules already incorporated into their governing documents, or can those rules be approved after application?
I believe we had it in a slide that items such as the HOA documentation regarding to charging and possibly even parking is something that should be included. Yeah, I would say just include as much information as you can that would pertain to that multi-unit housing project in terms of the allowances.
So they are required to provide any HOA rules, regulations, or bylaws allowing the use of an EV charging station by all residents of the complex with their application.
We do have another question. If my screen will quit jumping around. Can one, Chris Caldella asks, can one organization submit multiple project proposals?
Yes. Again, multiple projects can be submitted. They just have to be submitted individually based on the project location. That's probably the best way of thinking about it. You can have multiple chargers at one location, and in that one application, you can include the multiple chargers. But if you have multiple chargers in multiple locations, each different location will require a separate application in the GMS. And again, I really can't say it enough. There is that $25,000 maximum rebate amount per organization or location. So keep that in mind as you submit multiple projects, and also as you add as many chargers as possible to a single location.
All right, that's all the questions. Oh,
Yeah, I'll say we're about to wrap up. Any final words, Stephen?
Well, sure. In closing, we really appreciate everyone's attendance today, and I hope that you found this webinar worthwhile. I also want to thank everyone on the Volkswagen team for their help on the presentation and getting this webinar off the ground. I really, really appreciate it, guys. Thank you. A survey should pop up when you leave the event, which contains 2 yes or no questions and the option for you to be added to the grants distribution list. Also, all of the contact information and application related email accounts found in the presentation are also found on the DAQ Volkswagen website. Again, I'll just say the email pertaining to questions is daq.nc_vwgrants@ncdnr.gov. And thank you again for your time, and we look forward to working with you soon. Okay. Have a great week.
And one final thing, if you would like a list of the attendees, please send an email to the VW DAQ Grants email address to request that, and we'll provide it to you.
Wonderful. Thanks for that information, Brian. Okay, well, that concludes the presentation and the webinar. I hope everyone stays safe and have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks, Stephen.